Welcome to the May 13th, 2021 Parma City School District Board of Education meeting. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Roll call, Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Present.
Mrs. Carpus. Mr. Price.
Present.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Present.
Mr. Vaughn.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Nucio. The board remains committed to the health, safety, and welfare of its students and their parents, our staff, and our community. But even in these times, the board needs to take actions to keep the district operational now and fully functional in the future. For these reasons, the board will conduct an in-person meeting tonight with limited seating due to the required 3-foot social distancing. We will live stream this meeting to the public in accordance with applicable law. Dr. Smilak, can you please confirm that this meeting is currently being live streamed?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Can you please monitor the live streaming throughout the meeting? And if there is a problem, please speak up immediately so that the technical difficulty may be addressed.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. And with that, we now move to information to the board with Dr. Smilak.
Thank you. A few items. First, and actually, it could be redundant because you just asked me about these things, but we know that we received some different information about COVID and COVID procedures, first from the governor, then from the CDC. We are processing that information, and we'll make any adjustments that we need to in a timely manner. However, we aren't prepared at this time to make any changes based on either the governor's or the CDC's announcements over the last 2 days. We have found consistently throughout this process that it's extremely frustrating to really have 3 different entities sometimes giving us very conflicting information. You have the CDC from a national perspective, you have the Ohio Department of Health or the governor from a state perspective, and then you have the County Board of Health at a local perspective. And I would love to say that those 3 are always in sync, but that would be far from the reality that we have experienced. So we will continue to read as much information as we can, and any information about relaxing mask mandates will be forthcoming. I do want to note that there is one change in our quarantining procedures that we learned of actually just yesterday. We will no longer quarantine students exposed in the classroom, provided masks were being worn. And again, our students have been outstanding at wearing masks throughout our school year, very compliant with that. It really just is sort of a way of life at this point. We have to continue to quarantine students exposed in any other type of environment. So a lunchroom, a phys ed room, a cafeteria, extracurricular activity, any of those where students are prone to take masks off, and we have to continue to quarantine beyond 6 weeks. So I'm very thankful for Christina Mueller and her team. We will recognize them when it's time to actually have some more people back at a board meeting. Obviously, we're trying to keep our attendance down to a minimum. They have been fantastic. Parents are often frustrated, and we understand why parents are frustrated when their children are being quarantined. But we are absolutely staying abreast of all of the developments. And again, sometimes piecing together, here's what the Ohio Department of Health says, here's what the County Board of Health says, how does that translate for us? So we're thankful for their efforts. We have not met in this forum since issue 10 failed pretty significantly with a 63% to 37% margin. I think it's pretty important to take the opportunity to inform the community really what our next steps are. And quite frankly, our next steps are to press pause. The frustrating part about issue 10 is that this was not a short-term fix. This was not an idea that we went into a room and came out with. Issue 73 in the fall and then issue 10 this spring was a culmination of really 3 years of effort. When I started here, actually interviewed 3 architectural firms in the summer of 2018, GPD, AVG, and TDA, and chose GPD to help us through the master planning process. We've had a number of meetings in the fall of 2018 to outline what that process would look like. In 2019, we dedicated an entire year with 24 different community meetings. We had an online survey. We wanted this to be a community plan. There are 3 very critical arrows to line up when you're talking about a significant change, not just to a school district, or to a community. Your three arrows are your Board of Education, number one. Number two is your senior leadership and your school administrators. And number three, and really most importantly, is your community. And so our goal had been to get all three of those arrows aligned. And we felt that we built a consensus plan. We felt that those 24 meetings had produced something that we could get a bulk of the community behind to support and ultimately fund through their tax dollars. Clearly, that third arrow wasn't in line with ours. And we could very easily, as a knee-jerk reaction, as something that some people would say, yeah, they're finally doing something, yeah, we told them they don't need three, we could close the high school. But is that what our community wants? Clearly, we have missed the mark of really coming up with a community plan. And so, one of the arrows that I talked about first was the Board of Education. And we need to make sure that we know who will be on the Board of Education. The dinosaur in the room, or the elephant in the room, is that we have 4 seats that are open. Now, we don't ultimately control who's going to sit in those 4 seats. It's up to me. I'd love to see all 4 of you back. I'd love to see the 4 people that are for re-election back. Those folks, you folks, let us do our jobs. You entrust us, you empower us, and I think you've seen phenomenal results from that mindset. But ultimately, an election will determine that. Once the election determines that, then we have to again look at that second arrow. And that second arrow is our community. I certainly have ideas. Mr. Stravko certainly has ideas. Mr. Holtzman has ideas. We all have ideas about what we should do with the future of the facilities in our district. But we've got to again engage the community because all 3 arrows have to be aligned. Our Board of Education, our senior administrators, and our community. So we will go through an abbreviated process. We will not spend an entire calendar year in the year 2022, but we will again have opportunities for community input. And at this point, quite frankly, all options are back on the table, including potentially 1 high school. And there's certainly reasons that we could be excited about building what could be the best high school in the state, with the best career tech programs all under 1 roof. That could be an exciting prospect. But ultimately, I'm not the one who's going to decide that. We want the community to be engaged, the community to be involved, so that we can ultimately get their support for funding. So that is really where we're at. We need to know who's going to be sitting here. We don't want to make a quick reaction and then somebody else who's sitting in one of these seats makes a different thought next year and now we're looking sporadic. We've been stable. We have made tremendous progress financially, but certainly academically as well. We want to make sure that we can continue on that path and ultimately secure the public's support. Mr. Schweitzer, that's my comments, sir.
Well, thank you, Dr. Smilak. Any other information to the board this evening?
No.
Thank you very much. Communications this evening. Any communications from any board members? Treasurer?
Yes, I do have my 5-year forecast presentation. Mrs. Barkowski, we'll get the presentation. Put it up on the screen. Should be after a second.
Okay. You want to move on to amendments and then come back to the presentation?
She'll be right back.
All right.
Just turn them off.
While we're waiting, Mr. Schweitzer, can we talk about the scholarship presentation we made the other day?
Yeah. Why
And how
not?
interesting that is.
Yeah, if you want to take the lead,
Oh,
you can. Go
well,
ahead.
this is scholarships award season here in Parma schools, and the board gives out 3 scholarships. This year we gave out 4 $1,000 scholarships, thanks to a very generous anonymous donation, as well as the board members' donations. And we awarded our first scholarship earlier this week to Sydney Christopher. And she's a delightful young lady. We enjoyed making that presentation and had opportunity to wish her much success as she furthers her education in the fall.
Yeah, those are enjoyable. I mean, for years and years and years, we had this is under communications again, so, we had the banquet and all that kind of stuff. And I like those, and those are certainly valuable. But since, COVID and the change from last year and this year, it's kind of nice just doing it in the student's yard with their parents there, and you can have, siblings, you can have neighbors, they can invite whoever they want, where you're kind of limited when you do the banquet. And what's also nice, I think, is at the banquet, they get kind of a promissory note. Now that we're doing it this way, we actually hand them the cash, so that kind of makes them excited and jump up and down a little bit as we go. I say cash, it's a check, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have 3 more to go.
3 more, right?
We have 3 more to go, and that's next week.
Were the students surprised, or did they know about it?
We try to keep the students surprised. We talk to the parent, and then the students, the parent's responsible for making sure the student's there at an agreed upon time.
Okay.
So.
Yes, that's very fun. So,
Excellent young lady, too. She's going to be a pharmacist.
yeah, she's going into a doctoral program that she will finish in 6 years.
Yep.
So that sounds like an all-year-long education effort
she's a good
on her
kid.
part. We got her, we didn't get her the sign. Parma Council PTA has arranged for congratulations signs for all of the scholarship recipients. So they're out in the yards. If you go by and you see one of those, you'll know that they worked very hard in their high school years, had many accomplishments, and earned a scholarship in the program.
Yeah, she came straight from a dress rehearsal for a choir concert. Good, well-rounded student. Are we ready now?
I think we're ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Floor is yours, Mr. Lucio.
Next slide, please. So, most important thing is people want to know, how long are we positive? We're positive for 4 years to June of 2024. As I said, I've been saying all year, the state cut our funding last year. They gave us some of that money back this year. Last year was $2.4 million, and this year it was only $1.1 million. But they're saying going forward that we're going to go back to 2019 levels, which is put us positive through 2024. Another thing to notice up there is the collection rate of 97.7. Usually it's around 98 or 99. That means there's more delinquencies. But it's understandable with COVID, people are out of jobs and just are behind on their taxes. Another important thing up there is ESSER 3. We're going to get $22.3 million for ESSER 3. That's not general fund money. It's a federal grant money, and it does have restrictions. We can't just say, I'm going to use it all $22 million to pay general fund salaries, and we're looking good through 2028. They have restrictions on what we can do, what we can spend it on. And we'll have a plan for that coming up pretty soon. I just want to point that out. Go to the next page, Pam. So this is a graph just showing where the revenues and expenditures are. Of course, as the expenditures go up, which is the red line, and the revenues go down, you're going to have deficit spending, which is shows in the green line. Go to the next page, Pam, please. So this is our spendings. Most we're very reliant on property taxes. That's not uncommon with schools. 67% of our revenue comes from property taxes. 63 plus the other local stuff. So we have 67% local, and then the rest is from the state, which is either state foundation or other state funding. This is pretty common. Cities rely on income tax. That's why most of your property taxes go to schools. That's their big source. Our big source is property taxes. So this is kind of similar to what I was just showing. Like you can see the cash, 30-day cash is going down, and then in year 25 we are negative. So this is comparing the revenues and expenditures. Our next levy that's up for renewal is in 2024. So you can see that the blue and like I guess the little magenta or whatever color that is, pink, I'm not sure what it is, but You can see that they're even the first two until 2025 when we start losing funding if the levy's not passed, renewed. The next page. I talked about this earlier, where 67% of our money is from local sources and 33% from the state level. And I mentioned state funding was cut because of COVID-19, but we anticipate the revenue will go back. So the changes in operating revenue, as I mentioned, they cut our funding last year, but they restored some of it in this year. And also at the bottom there, it says ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 are our largest sources of revenue, which we have to spend through 2024. Go to the next page, ma'am. So wages and benefits, which is common for most school districts, 75 to 80% is normal for school districts. We're at 77, which is in line with most school districts. Purchase services has kind of been growing, but that's the ed choice and open enrollment and charter schools. We spend quite a bit of money on that. We don't actually physically write them a check. The funding is just taken out of our state funding, so we never see the money, but we have to report it as an expenditure for us. And that falls under purchase services. So this is just showing, of course, the red line is the wages, which is our biggest percentage of our expenditures, which is common because we employ people to teach. We do other things for the school district. The blue part is our benefits, which salaries and benefits, like I said, is 77%. And then you see the orange part, which is the purchase services, which I mentioned is the open enrollment, ed choice, charter schools. Go to the next page, Jim. This shows all the money that's spent for purchase services. You see the ed choice, the charter schools, which is community schools, and open enrollment. We have open enrollment mostly to Cleveland Municipal School District, Cleveland Metropolitan School District. We have probably about $600,000 a year in lost revenue to students who live in our district but decide to go to Cleveland Metropolitan Schools. I don't know if it's different funding or programs they want to go to, I'm not sure. But this shows the amount of money we're losing. So what now? All the levies must be renewed. We have one levy up in 24, and I think after that it's not until 27. We know 33% of our revenue comes from the state. If that stays the same, this forecast is good. If it goes lower or higher, it will change. Spare school funding is going through the state house right now. They've been talking, it could be in the bill, could be in the budget bill, it may not be in the budget bill. I guess we won't find out until June 30th. Other proposals like ed choice, I think the new Senate leaders are for ed choice, so that may hurt us, but we have to find out in the next couple months. Also, we have to keep pace with our expenditures and use our ESSER funds wisely in the next. We have $22 million used for ESSER funds, and if we use it properly, we could reduce the deficit in that 5th year. So that's what we're hoping to do. Do you have any questions?
Well, can you explain for people that don't know what ESSER funds are?
Okay,
Just
so
what ESSER means.
ESSER is an acronym. I'm really not sure what exactly it stands for, but it's from the money every time.
COVID relief
It's
stuff.
a COVID relief. They had 3 different bills. There's ESSER 1, which we received $1.8 million. Originally it was 2.4, but $600,000 had to go to charter schools. So we got 1.8. Then ESSER 2 was the next bill that I think President Trump signed in December, and that gave us about $10 million. And then with the new, under President Biden, we have ESSER 3, which gave us $22.3 million. And it's funding from federal money, which we have to use for specific reasons. Like ESSER 3, it says you have to use 20% of it for enhancement of education. So we can't just say, oh, we're going to take all the teacher salaries and use $22 million to wipe it out. We have to do things you have to have programs that follow their guidelines. And it's kind of strict, and you have to have an application, and they have to approve the application, and you have until 2024 to spend that money.
Thank you, that's a good explanation. And I don't really have any questions. I'd like to congratulate you again. We've done this a couple of times over the years. In 2018, that was your first full year as treasurer. You just come in just before that. That's the year that Dr. Smilak came on board. And it's year 3 board members came on and 2 other board members since that time.
Yep.
And you inherited a situation when you came in 2018 that was kind of predicting the Parma City schools were on the verge of becoming belly up. As a matter of fact, the state was watching us
Yep.
as we went. And over the past 3 years, we now have a solid bottom line that we are in the black for the next 4 years, with some things moving around, maybe 5. And I'd like to congratulate you, the superintendent, and the other board members for the turnaround that's taken place since 2018. Good job. Thank you.
I would like to congratulate you on the great audit.
And the audit.
That is wonderful.
Good. So the audit, just to explain that, the management numbers, there were 7 categories. I know we beat this
Oh,
up some,
you're
but
talking about the star
Yeah.
grading system. It's a new system they came out with this year, fiscal year 20 audits, to see how transparent school districts are. And there's 7 possible best practices. And if you got 5 of the 7, you would get 4 stars. And we got 7 out of 7. So we went beyond just the best practices to get 4 stars. We got 7
so
stars.
that was like
7.
super stellar.
Yes, and I think we
Lights
for
out.
some of that.
Lights out, hit it on the ballpark.
Dr. Smilak talked about that last time. And for all of us that have been in this game for years, that's just unheard of.
That's awesome.
So that, add that to the congratulations. So the last 3 years, this has been totally turned around. And you're at the center of that, so thank you.
Thanks.
Very good. Very good to you and your team.
Okay, any other questions for?
I just had a comment. As to elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
Okay, don't ask me that in 5 minutes.
You two can probably Google it like I did.
I'll just say yes, sir. I got the basics. Sean, do we have any amendments this evening?
We do have 2 amendments.
Okay.
After the agenda meeting on Monday, Ms. Bridget Zywick, who's the principal of Parma Senior, put in her resignation letter. So that, we added a resolution, which is 210.
And 212.01, I think, is her resignation.
Okay, so we put that in, and then we had her as renewing her contract in the previous resolution, so that resolution had to be amended to take her name off.
Okay,
So she-
and that's 207. So 207 will not have her name on there
Correct.
because 212.01 is her
Resignation.
resignation.
And
All right,
the one that's 212.1 does not need to be amended, just the 207 needs to be amended.
correct. All right. So she's no longer on the list to be renewed.
Correct.
I got it. Everybody understand? Okay. Then I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-189, adoption of amendments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2021-05-189. Any questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Schweitzer?
Yes?
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Resolution 2021-05-189 has been approved. Thank you. Is there any?
And we agree with the public? We do not.
We do not? Okay. So this would be the point where you're open to the public to address the board, but we do not have any requests. Then I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-190, approval of the written record of proceedings from the April 29th, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2021-05-190. Questions, comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Schweitzer,
Yes?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Resolution 2021-05-190 has been approved. That brings us to curriculum. Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-191, approval for foreign exchange student from Spain to attend Parma Senior High School.
Second.
A motion and second for 2021-05-191. Questions or comments?
This is obviously for the fall.
Yes.
Just,
Yes.
Sure. Other than that, we good.
No, I guess we're back to being able to foreign travel,
Yeah.
things like that. Great. Any other questions? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-191 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-192, approval for foreign exchange student from Italy to attend Parma Senior High School.
Second.
A motion and second for 2021-05-192. Questions?
That's pretty cool, though.
Same thing, I like it. Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-192 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-193, authorizing agreement for Power School software.
Second.
A motion and second for 2021-05-193. Questions or comments?
Is this something we renew every year?
Yeah, this is not a
This is
change.
the one, I was just trying to remember.
We've been using all of these
Right.
Power School and eSchool Plus programs.
Okay. Good question. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-193 has been approved.
Awesome, unless another board member has anything to discuss, then this concludes curriculum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughn.
Most welcome.
Let's move to Mr. Price with business.
Yes, I'd like to move to adopt resolution 2021-05-194, authorizing purchase of a data center infrastructure.
Second?
Motion and second for 2021-05-194. Questions, comments?
What is infrastructure, is this for like the internet?
Yeah, this is for the entire system that we need, all the hardware. The one piece I would point out is that we can price through the Ohio School Council, which always is a great way to make sure we're obtaining the best value, as it is a purchasing consortium.
All right.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. Resolution 2021-05-194 has been approved.
I'd like to move to adopt resolution 2021-05-195, authorizing purchase of 2 production systems.
Second?
Motion and second for 2021-05-195. Questions or comments?
These are used by the print shop for printing, and I believe Mr. Sloom, who runs it down there, said that we bought this in 2007, and they've had 20 million copies on these machines. So these are heavy-duty production machines.
I think they're known as the Beast.
So he calls them the Beast.
And we get a trade-in value, don't we, even for the old ones, no matter how old?
$15,000 per machine, there's 2 of them, so $30,000.
Better than good for a car, because they don't have any miles. Any questions? All right, Mr. Nucio.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-195 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-196, authorizing purchase of portable two-way radios.
Second?
A motion and second for 2021-05-196. Questions or comments?
These some kind of special two-way radios?
These are,
I think it's just replacement.
it's to replace all of the radios in the district. The other piece, though, is that we can easily switch to a frequency that connects with our emergency services locally, which is, you hope you never need that, but it's a great advantage of this system.
From what we had progress.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and again, you know, these
It's
are.
like a car, you just more things on it.
Very cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-196 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-197, authorizing and directing the incorporation of project-specific project labor agreements with the Cleveland Building and Construction Trades Council for certain capital improvement projects for the fiscal year 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for 2021-05-197. Questions, comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-197 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-198, declaring select pupils impractical to transport for the 2021-2022
It should be 2022.
22 school year.
I believe it's this school year.
It is this week.
It should be
2021.
2020.
It's 2020 and 2021?
Correct.
Sorry about that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second declaring select pupils impractical to transport for the 2020-2021 school year. Any questions or comments? This is an annual thing, correct?
Yes, they did this earlier in the year, and I think one student was missed, or turned in the
Yeah.
paperwork late, so just for one student.
I mean, it sounds,
It's an
when you
annual-
read it, it sounds negative, but the reality
Yes.
is that.
It's an annual thing we do.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. Resolution 2021-05-198 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss, this concludes business for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. Right back at you. We do with finance.
I'd like to move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-199, adoption of updated 2020-2021 budget estimate and fiscal projections for 2020 and 2021 through 2024 through 2025.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for 2021-05-199. A lot of numbers flying out.
Yeah,
Any questions or comments? That's the 5-year thing.
That's the 5-year forecast I know.
We just did, so people know. Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-199 has been approved.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-05-200, approval of the April 2021 financial report.
Second.
Motion and second for 2021-05-200. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-200 has been approved.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-05-201, ratification of investments.
Second.
A motion and a second for 2021-05-201. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-201 has been approved.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-05-202, approval of supplemental appropriations.
Second.
Motion and second for 2021-05-202. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-202 has been approved.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-05-203, approval of then and now certificates over $3,000.
Second.
A motion and second for 2021-05-203. Questions or comments?
Mr. Nucio.
Okay.
Always have to explain these.
So, the first one is for public waste, and person in the business office she was moving around money, and by the time she moved all the money around to create a purchase order, she already received the invoice, so that was the first one. The second one, Trident Insurance, that was our insurance carrier last year. We no longer use Trident Insurance, and this was for lawsuits or claims someone filed against us. And Trident will not reissue the invoice because they're not our insurance carrier anymore, they don't care. So they said that's the deductible, which is $10,700, I think it is. And they're not gonna reissue it, so we have to pay it. That's what that was for.
So it's nobody's fault in the business, it's all their fault.
It's just, yeah, there's, the date of the invoice compared to the date of the PO is
Right,
a pretty big gap, but
I mean, they just sent it to us, but they wouldn't change the dates.
all right. Any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Nucio.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-203 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss, this concludes finance for this evening.
Thank you, sir. Legislation this evening, Mrs. Bratz, do you have anything?
Not really, other than just to remind everyone that the State House is going through the legislative process for the budget. And I would encourage anybody that cares about education, public education in particular, to contact their legislators and encourage them to smile wide when it comes to funding public education. That's it.
Thank you very much. And we do have some pretty good representatives in the Parma area, in Columbus, that do
Advocate for it.
smile for the Parma schools, so just keep our fingers crossed. Human Resources, Mrs. Bratz.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-204, approval of the following certificated exhibits, confirmation of stipend amounts, acceptance of certificated resignation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Resolution 2021-05-204. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-204 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-205, acceptance of certificated retirement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for 2021-05-205. Any questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-205 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-206, confirmation of certificated administrative appointments replacement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for 2021-05-206. Questions or comments?
I'd like to make a few comments. First, the high school assistant principal will be at Normandy upon your appointment. Again, we have operated Normandy this year with one fewer administrator. Really commend them from splitting up the duties of the fourth administrators. That person has not been here since early in the school year. Kevin, though, is coming to us from South Equal Lyndhurst. He was really on the fast track to administration in South Equal Lyndhurst. When I called South Equal Lyndhurst superintendent, she actually explained that they were creating out of ESSER funds a position for him, an administrative position. They were very hopeful to keep him. He was actually a graduate of Rush, and so we're thrilled to be able to get him. The interview team was very, very impressed, and Kevin actually reached out to Mrs. Urban, the principal, and said, I'm aware that Southeast Lyndhurst is very interested in hiring me for an administrative position, but I'm committed to you, I'm loyal to you. I really appreciate the opportunity, so we're excited to bring Kevin. Secondly, Chris Klug is in front of us, and Chris Klug has been with us now for 2 years. He has been a dean of students this year and last at Hillside and Green Valley. He is taking the next step in his administrative career upon your appointment. he will be at Pleasant Valley, and we're thrilled to have his presence at Pleasant Valley. No one who has worked with Chris has anything but stellar comments to make about Chris. He has really impressed everybody on our administrative team, parents, teachers, and certainly students. So we're very excited, Chris, for you to take that next step. Very grateful for your service for the last 2 years, and very excited to see what you'll be able to do in one school, and I'm sure you're happy about that, which will be at Pleasant Valley. So I'm hopeful that the board will appoint both of these candidates this evening.
All right, well, let's take a vote and then we can hear. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-2006 has been approved. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Anything you'd like to say, or? Really?
I'm excited and I'm ready for it.
That's why everybody likes it.
Awesome.
All right, well, congratulations again. And,
Okay.
yeah, so let's move forward.
Can I move on?
This is the amended one, by the way.
Oh, okay. I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-207 as amended, reappointment of certificated administrative personnel.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for 2021-05-207 as amended. Any questions or comments?
I can make this comment. I really, key to effective leadership is continuity, or one key, I should say. And just very proud of stability, consistency that we've achieved with our administrative staff. We can't secure the buy-in of our parents, of our teachers, of our kids ultimately when we continue to be a hamster wheel in leadership. And, aside from Mrs. Iwick's resignation, which we're saddened by, we will continue to employ and retain an extremely talented, dedicated administrative staff. And just very grateful for the loyalty and service of all of these folks.
Thank you. Questions? I see on the bottom of the list, because in alphabetical order there, that Bridget Zywick's name was still on there. Now, the amended means it's really not on there. Correct. As we go, it's a little bizarre. And on the actual resolution that, will be signed afterwards, her name will be removed, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-207 has been approved as amended.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-208, non-renewal of certificated administrative contract.
Second.
Motion and second for 2021-05-208. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-208 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-209, authorization to employ new replacement certificated staff for the Parma City School District.
Second.
Motion and second for 2021-05-209. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-209. This is necessary, if I'm correct, because of a lot of fires that take place during the summer.
Correct.
And, to make sure that you were able to stay on top of things as the summer progresses. Thank you.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-210, revision of the Learning Lab tutor job description and adoption of revised job description.
Second.
Motion is second for 2021-05-210. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. This is, and I think you've all experienced this in some way with your own families or your own professional experience, but we've had this wheel issue at the middle schools. And Learning Lab teachers lead study halls, and at times, study halls are very lengthy the middle school. It's always been sort of a weakness, and I want to commend Mrs. Stropko and her team for their work. I also want to thank Parma Education Association for their collaboration and really taking a step forward at what we're looking at in terms of this job description. We will employ social emotional curriculum now as part of that. What had just been a study hall. I don't want to say this is a full-blown advisory period, but we're taking steps toward that, and revising this job description allows us to really make that a more meaningful experience as opposed to a very lengthy study hall for our children.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-210 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-211, revision of the Career and College Readiness Coordinator job description and adoption of revised job description.
Second.
A motion is second for 2021-05-211. Questions or comments on this? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-211 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-212, revision of the Building Test Coordinator job description and adoption of revised job description.
Second.
Motion is second for 2021-05-212. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-212 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-212.01, acceptance of certificated administrative resignation.
Second.
A motion and a second. 2021-05-212.01 as discussed earlier in the amended resolution. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed in this one. I think it's hard to put in words what Bridget has done to Parma Senior High and the leadership that she's shown with her staff and these kids. Has really turned it around from the time we hired her. And so I'm disappointed that she's leaving. Yet I know for her family that the decision she made is better for her and her family situation. So I'll miss her here in Parma. So wish her well.
Yeah, I think we all wish her well, and this certainly, so everybody knows, this is not anything that the school district is happy with, but we're happy for her to move forward in her personal goals and things she wants to do for her family. So
Over the years,
Godspeed.
I will say I have seen sometimes the good ones, we get them back. They go, and when life,
Grass isn't greener, huh?
well, sometimes that, but sometimes also when life just makes the turn and you're more ready for certain things, sometimes they come back.
I remember her as a young teacher when she first came into the system and left and then came back and left and came back again. So I've heard her move on again for a third time, I think.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-212.01 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-213, approval of the following classified exhibits: confirmation of classified appointments replacements, approval of classified non-compensated leaves of absence, confirmation of classified resignation, and approval of classified stipend.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for 2021-05-213. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-213 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-214, acceptance of classified retirement.
Second.
A motion and a second for 2021-05-214. Questions or comments? Mr. Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-214 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-215, reappointment of classified administrative personnel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for 2021-05-215. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-215 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-216, confirmation of classified administrative appointment.
Second.
Motion and second for 2021-05-216. Questions or comments?
I'd just like to point out to the board and to our public that we are getting a seasoned veteran. We certainly were concerned about Mr. Caputo's departure. Wanted to make sure that we get someone because when transportation goes bad, the entire district goes bad. And Mr. Schweitzer and I lived through some of those years, Mr. Boltzmann as well. You really have to have competence there, and we're very happy to get Ms. Malika from Berea City Schools, where she has been their transportation supervisor. We're very grateful that she considered coming here, and we're looking forward to employing her.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important position. It's, make things run smooth, like you said, for the entire district. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-216 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-217, authorization to employ new replacement classified staff for Parma City School District.
Second.
Motion second for 2021-05-217. Questions or comments? This also just allows us to hire people during the summer as we move forward. Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-217 has been approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2021-05-218, authorization to release from employment classified employee.
Second.
Motion and a second for 2021-05-218. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-218 has been approved.
Unless another board member has anything to discuss this evening, that concludes human resources.
Thank you very much. That was quite a list. Happens in May as we go. That moves on to policies now, and doing policies this evening will be Mr. Vaughn.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-219, approval of revised policy 1623, section 504 ADA, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for 2021-05-219. Questions or comments? My question is, on all of these, we had the first reading 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
These are all revised. Would it be safe to say that all these revisions are just updates?
Yes, there's nothing significant on any of these. These are Neola recommendations, and we trust them to keep us legal, essentially, and all of these are
Yeah, well, I
pretty
guess
straightforward.
when I know there's nothing new. They're all revisions.
Correct.
And all, yeah, just keep us up to date. Thank you. Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-219 has been approved.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-05-220, approval of revised policy 2240, controversial issues.
Second.
Motion second for 2021-05-220. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes, 2021-05-220 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-221, approval of revised policy 2260.01, section 504//ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on a disability.
Second.
A motion and second for 2021-05-221. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-221 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-222, approval of revised policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in the district programs or activities.
Second?
A motion and second for 2021-05-222. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-222 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-223, approval of revised policy 3123, section 504 ADA, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment.
Second?
Motion is, excuse me, motion is second for 2021-05-223. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-223 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-224, approval of revised policy 4123, section 504/ADA, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment.
Second?
A motion second for 2021-05-224. Questions or comments? I guess I was just trying to find the difference between
Yeah.
223 and 224. There must be something in the policy itself that's slightly further.
Well, it's a different policy.
I know. The description's the same. Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-224 has been approved.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-225, approval of revised policy 5336, care of students with diabetes.
Second?
A motion second for 2021-05-225. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-225 has been approved.
All right, I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-226, approval of revised policy 7440-01, video surveillance and electronic monitoring, the new title, current title, body-worn video system.
Second?
A motion second for 2021-05-226. Interesting. Questions or comments? Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis,
Yes.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Yes. 2021-05-226 has been approved.
Unless anyone has anything else to discuss with policies, this concludes policy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vaughn, thank you for filling in on that this evening. At this time, is there any further information requested by board members this evening? Are there any new questions or concerns to be read into the record this evening? None. Then I move to adopt resolution 2021-05-228 to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-05-228. Mr. Nucio?
Mr. Schweitzer,
Yes?
Mr. Vaughn,
Yes.
Mrs. Bratz,
Yes.
Mr. Kreis.
Yes.
This meeting is adjourned.